Hello, Zuko here. If you don't know, my name is Jess. I go by Zumi on the internet because one time I was 15. It is finally time for me to talk about the 10 worst books I read in 2020. If you missed it, I did the 10 best books I read in 2020, and I will put that in the link over there. So you can click that when you're done watching this. So the really fun part about this video is that I don't have these books really, and I think I own 3 of them, and I don't feel like going to find them because I unhauled most of them because I didn't like them. I also don't really have these in order because they were all pretty bad, but I guess I will just start with the ones that I kind of hated the least. And we'll start out with The Near Witch by Victoria Schwab. This book had characters that didn't have personality. None of them. Like, they were all just so bland. The audiobook narrator was more bland than the characters somehow. Every, comma sounded like a period. It just felt really stilted and off. But none of the characters, had personality. She never, the main character, she never talked about her feelings. There was never anything there. And she meets a guy after kids start disappearing who she's never seen before and immediately goes, he's a good guy. He just is. He can't be the one who's stealing children. And I was like, that's weird. It was, a 2-star because I liked the premise, but the execution was awful because the writing was so bad. Everyone was like, oh, this was so lyrical, and I'm like, but the characters all sucked. And most of the writing in a novel is making the characters interesting, I feel like, and they weren't. I guess number 9, the 9th worst book I read this year, was 5 Feet Apart by Rachel Lidicott, I believe. This is a book about 2 kids with cystic fibrosis who are doing a long-term hospital stay because they have cystic fibrosis. If you don't know, cystic fibrosis is a chronic disease that you are born with where mucus forms in your lungs at a very extreme rate, and because everyone tends to have their own strain of this illness, you are not supposed to be close to other people with cystic fibrosis because you can pass each other's versions onto the other and get more sick. And this whole book is about 2 teens who are like, well, instead of staying apart, we should be closer. Which I guess is what people do during a pandemic. It's called 5 feet apart because they're supposed to stay 6 feet apart, but the girl's like, I'm gonna be a rebel. I'm only gonna stay 5 feet apart. And I don't know, as someone who has had to spend the last year being 6 feet apart from everybody, it's actually not that hard. And also it's for my health and safety, which I prioritize above being close to people that could get me sick. That seems like logic to me, but apparently it's not. I don't know. I mean, it's clearly not, so I guess the book is realistic in that sense, but I don't like the romanticizing of people being willing to put themselves in danger for love that they just started because they just met this guy at a hospital. It was ridiculous. I didn't like it. The 8th most hated book I read this year is I'm Thinking of Ending Things by, I believe, Ian Reid. I might be wrong. I'm trying to remember all these off the top of my head. This was just turned into a Netflix movie. The Netflix movie felt like being gaslit. The book was just kind of boring and also felt a little bit like being gaslit. I liked the book more than the movie because there wasn't a musical number in the book. I liked the book less than the movie because there was not an animated pig. But I didn't like either. It just, I don't know, it's like bizarro horror thriller mystery, but it was bad and I didn't like it. The 6th worst book I read this year is What If It's Us by Becky Albertalli and Adam Silvera. I now know, after reading that book and a couple others, I don't like Becky Albertalli's writing, and I don't like Adam Silvera's writing. The characters in this book were exactly the same as the characters in They Both Die at the End, where there's the stoic poor boy who has really strong family bonds and he just got out of a relationship, and then the nerdy awkward boy with a mental illness who's never been in a relationship before, but he's attracted to the stoic boy, and he's I hated it. And Arthur, the character written by Becky Albertalli, so annoying. The relationship didn't make any sense because they spent the first half of the book not liking each other, and then suddenly they were just we do now, even though nothing changed. And Arthur was still annoying. And I don't know why character who wasn't Arthur suddenly stopped finding him annoying because he didn't stop being annoying. So there's that. The 5th worst book I read this year was, I'm gonna say, The Sacrifice Box by Martin Stewart. This book was about a weird box that just lived in the woods for some reason and called friend groups to it and made them put something in it. And it had rules like don't go at night and don't go alone and don't take anything out of the box. And like someone breaks the rules. And then unironically a murderous teddy bear goes on a rampage. And it's exactly as like ridiculous as it sounds, but it's written like it's trying to be really cool and edgy, but the whole time you're like, but it's a teddy bear trying to kill people. How am I supposed to take this seriously? So, yeah. The 4th worst book I read this year was The Last Star by Rick Yancey. I actually DNF'd this book. I read The Fifth Wave, and it was fine. I read whatever the sequel is, and it didn't need to be there. Nothing happened in that whole book. I don't know why it existed. And then I read like a third of the 3rd book. And then went, this doesn't need to be here either. There was no purpose to the whole book. The series was not thought out. I don't know why it was published. It was bad. Like, I've never seen a series that needed to be a series less than this one. It could have ended the 1st book. I'm hiccuping. And it would have been a better conclusion than trying to read the 2nd book or slog through the 3rd book. Like, it was a fun alien book, but then there weren't aliens, but there were, but there weren't, but there were, but there weren't. Ridiculous. Nope, hated it. Did I do this wrong? The 4th worst book I read in 2020 is My Life as an Ice Cream Sandwich by E.B. Savoy. This is a book about a 12-year-old who, Act 6, who goes to New York to stay with her father for a little bit, and she can't make friends because she is so obsessed with Star Trek and Wonder Woman that she just is annoying. And she's like objectively annoying. I'm not sure why this book was written or who it was written for, because it's like a middle grade but with a bunch of references to Star Trek, which most young like tweens and 10-year-olds haven't seen. So I'm not sure why this book exists or who it was written for or why it was written at all, because it was awful. And like none of the characters were good. Nothing was redeeming about any of it. It was awful. The 3rd worst book I read in 2020 is Me, Earl, and the Dying Girl. This is a whole book about how, like, the female character, who I believe is named Rachel, that's the dying girl, isn't even, like, named in the cover because she's not important enough to need to be named. She's just there as a plot device to make the main character boy grow and develop as a person and maybe, like, learn something. And I'm not here to use, like, the death of female characters to make male characters grow as people. Like, that's the whole plot of the book. That's not a good plot. I fully don't believe that we need books that say that female characters are just plot devices to make men look better. It's just not, it's not it. The 2nd worst book I read this year, and this was hard to decide, is Adam Silvera's The Infinity Sons. This book is like a urban fantasy set in New York with no world building, and none of the characters are interesting. I got halfway through and went, I don't know what's happening. I don't know why I should care what's happening. And it's just not good. Like, there was just no world building. And Adam Silvera does this thing in his books where he picks like 1 or 2 slang words and just has one character who repeats them constantly. And like, I think in this one it was like hella. One of the characters said hella constantly. And it always seems out of place. And the characters all kind of read as the same people. So it was really awful and I DNF'd it about 50% through. Finally, the worst book that I read in 2020 was Grasshopper Jungle by Andrew Smith. This is a book about horny teenagers and also horny grasshoppers. This book couldn't go a page without mentioning like shit, or how someone was horny, or I thought of poop and I was horny. And there was a sentence that was like, piss and grasshopper semen, and I was out. There's a female character in this too who just complains the whole time and then has sex with the main character and then cries. That's her whole thing. Otherwise, it's about the main character and his best friend, because his girlfriend isn't actually a character. She's just there to complain and then cry. and I didn't love that. We need to stop writing books with female characters who are just there to make the male characters look better. Because she's also, like, kind of homophobic. For, like, it was bad. It was so awful. It was, like, unnecessarily vulgar. And I don't mind, vulgar things in books. But this whole book was just, like, about horny teenagers who have to deal with the world being taken over by horny grasshopper monsters. And everything was fucking. Everyone was talking about fucking. I can't do it. It was unnecessary. The writing was also bad. Like, it would, like, end with, and that was our day. And this is how it is. And it felt like it was written poorly, I believe, because it was supposed to be written by the main character. Because he was a historian, he decided. He was, like, 14. But he's like, I'm the historian, and I have to document everything. But he wasn't a good writer at all. So it was a poorly written book, but I think intentionally poorly written, because I've read Andrew Smith's works in the past, and I've enjoyed at least the Alex Crow I read and I liked. So this is, like, intentionally badly written. And I don't know why you would do that, you know? It was just awful. The characters sucked, the plot sucked, the writing sucked, and I hated it. So yeah. Those are my top 10 worst books I read in 2020. I hope you all enjoyed it. Let me know down below if you enjoyed these books, or let me know down below if you also hated these books. And I will see you whenever I do my next video.